Over the past few years, we've been approached by a number of EAPs or employee assistance programs, as well as employers who are looking for ways to enhance their EAP. They were asking how can they integrate credible, nationally board certified coaching into what's being offered through their EAP. We've created a lot of partnerships through that. We're grateful for that. And as a result of that, one thing led to another, and I was asked to come out and speak on the topic at the National EAP Conference recently. So what follows with the remainder of this video is some of the highlights from that presentation. I just wanted to lay out some of the details that I provided at that event based on the feedback we received, and certainly reach out to us. This is not meant to be comprehensive. It's just a brief overview. And if you'd like to talk through what that might look like for your EAP or for you as an employer, reach out and we can talk about it. Let's talk briefly out of the gate about the history of health and wellness coaching, because we need to get everybody on the same page. Some people, when they think of a health and wellness coach, they think of their 7th grade PE teacher. They think of the Instagram fitness model. They think of I don't know, your high school football coach or volleyball coach. So let's start by getting everyone on the same page. When we say a nationally board certified health and wellness coach, let's make sure that we're all on the same track with this. So early influencers, coaching, it started to come into its own in terms of the credible element of health and wellness coaching really in the early 2000s. Some of the bigger organizations that really had an influence on that, certainly Well Coaches, Catalyst Coaching Institute, Real Balance, and some others that did a really good job. But in 2017, there was a seismic shift. Things changed dramatically in 2017 to your benefit, to I think all of our benefits. But what happened there is the NBHWC came to be, the National Board for Health and Wellness Coaching. It was no longer the Wild West. It was no longer the, well, I'm more charismatic than you, so I'm probably a better coach. It was, well, who's following a code of ethics? Who has a scope of practice? Who's been tested? Who's been through an accredited or approved program? So we started to get some structure around this in 2017. And for you as an EAP or an employer, this was a very, very valuable move. Now, if you look at the pre and post 2017, you can see up there on the slide, in pre-2017, there was no measuring stick. It was often scripted coaching. You'd find people that were nice people, good on the phone, give them a script, make sure people are eating their kale and exercising, and that was kind of it. Training was all over the place. You know, some people had almost nothing. They just loved wellness and were like, hey, well, I think I'll be a coach. And others had been through an extensive amount of training. Some had great experience, some had none, essentially none. There was often more of a call center approach to coaching. You call in, you get a random coach, different each time. A lot of times there's verbal box checking that was going on. So again, kind of the kale exercise questioning process that they were going through. And as a result, it became, in many cases, little more than just that. Verbal box checking. Instead of going online and checking boxes of what you're doing, you were simply going through that with your coach. And certainly various credentials. Some were clinicians, some were counselors, some were more fitness coaches, personal trainers, physical therapists, physicians, nurses, you name it. But there was not a standard. Now, when the NBHWC came to be, and this is what's valuable to you, that all changed. That's where here, when I'm presenting this, about 5 years after that happened, you now have coaches are truly experts in behavior change. There's a national board certification. It's put on by the NBME, the National Board for Medical Examiners. That's the same organization that does the licensure for physicians. So very respected organization. You've got to have a certain amount of experience to earn that credential. And maybe most importantly, there is a code of ethics and there's a scope of practice. And that is very, very valuable for all of us. So what exactly is health and wellness coaching? We have a definition, and I'd love to refer you to the website for the National Board. It's nbhwc.org. And they define it as health and wellness coaches partner with clients looking to enhance their well-being through self-directed, lasting changes aligned with their values. In the course of their work, health and wellness coaches display unconditional positive regard for their clients and a belief in their ability to change, honoring the fact that each client is an expert on their own life while ensuring all interactions are respectful and non-judgmental. So health and wellness coaches will talk about what do people want to start? What do they want to stop? What do they want to enhance? What do they want to change? Those aspects are the focal point. They're not lecturing. They're not telling the person what to do. They're helping draw out of them what matters to them and then help them move forward in the most effective manner. Many people that aren't familiar with the more credible version of health and wellness coaching will often default to the phrases food and fitness. They think that when they're participating in health and wellness coaching, they're supposed to talk about what am I eating or am I exercising? So it's this food and fitness thing. That's not the case. An effective program set up with a nationally board certified health and wellness coach is going to be able to address any key aspect of life. You can see here on the slide a number of different categories that oftentimes get covered. Some people see this as the wheel of wellness. I'm going to play with this diagram a little bit later in a different format. But this does a nice job of laying out for you what are some of the topics that potentially could get discussed when you're talking to a health and wellness coach. So it's not just food and fitness. You might be discussing stress management, sleep enhancement, resilience, mindfulness, healthy eating, professional or personal pursuits, burnout prevention, tobacco cessation, work-life balance, exercise or activity goals, general mental health and well-being, emotional health. So these are the aspects. It can cover all of these things. So I think you're probably beginning to think, oh, well, that's a different deal. Yes, I can completely see how that would benefit our employees as we're trying to support not just their physical health, but their emotional and their mental health as well. So those are some just simple examples. Now, the theoretical orientation, coaches are experts in behavior change. They're not expert in a certain area. They're not acting as, simplest example, a counselor. We'll talk about the difference between counseling and coaching here in a moment. But they're helping that person with the behavior change piece. So theoretical orientation, they're going to be pulling in motivational interviewing, intrinsic motivation, stages of change, temperament, appreciative inquiry, strength-based approach, and growth mindset. Those are some of the concepts that the coach is going to pull in and help that person work through. The motivational interviewing piece, for those of you who are familiar with the Catalyst 360 podcast, you may have heard Dr. Bill Miller. If that's a topic that's interesting to you, and many of you watching this are probably well-versed in motivational interviewing, we had him on the 200th episode of the Catalyst 360 podcast. So you may want to go back and listen to that. He did a great job. That's the guy that started motivational interviewing, so you may want to check that out. The key difference between counseling and coaching, we get asked that a lot, especially since we're working with so many EAPs now as a complement to what they're doing on the counseling side. A lot of people, employers especially, will be asking, well, so what's the difference? Susanna does a great job of explaining this. She's both a licensed counselor and a nationally board certified health and wellness coach, our chief learning officer, and she describes it as the difference between snorkeling and scuba diving. The scuba diving, you're going deeper. That's the counseling piece. Snorkeling, you're just going along the surface. Now you may glance down below, but you're not going deep. If you go deep with a snorkel, you're going to get in big trouble. And it's very much the same with coaching. If you try to go too deep with coaching, not only are you outside your scope of practice, but you can get in real danger. You may also want to have that iceberg analogy in mind. The coaching is really looking at what's above the surface, while the counseling is working on what's below the surface. Counselors focus on mental health and emotional healing for issues like anxiety and depression, which obviously affect an individual's ability to function well. Coaches guide by asking questions and structuring a process for individuals to achieve their physical and emotional well-being goals. Counseling, you've got a list there on the screen. Licensed mental health professionals. Online, can be video, phone, live chat, or in person. It's an in-depth exploration of past trauma, family of origin. It considers why past relationships have been destructive. It addresses anxiety and depression that may impact work or home. It's going to get into grief and loss issues, major life transitions, and certainly is your best route for high-risk employees or more serious psychiatric challenges. So that's the counseling side of things. Now, if we want to look at coaching and how that is a little different in terms of categories, coaches help improve overall well-being, and we talked about that list earlier of what that might encompass. It's not just food and fitness, it's all these other pieces. It provides support in higher stress periods, helps you set priorities, clarify values, talk through challenges, create a personal vision for well-being. They are nationally board certified, if we're doing it right, generally provided by phone, clarify goals, identify obstacles, behaviors, and creating action plans to achieve desired results. It's typically, not always, but typically more action step oriented than counseling, and it's time limited, it's goal directed, it's present and future oriented versus being past oriented that counseling generally moves toward. Now, ROI, that's important. If you're an EAP that's thinking, how can we do a better job of providing services for our employer clients that we serve, or if you're an employer looking at how can we build our EAP tools and resources for our employees so that we can help support the things that the team members need. That's altruism is great, but you've got to pay your bills also, and we get that. So let's take just a few minutes talking through some of the ROI pieces that certainly may not be your top priority, but it's in there. It's got to be addressed. So let's talk through that just a little bit. The ROI for your clients. We've been doing this since 2007. So as I'm recording this, we're about to start our 17th year. And some of the data we've collected internally is pretty interesting. And there's a lot of growing research on coaching. So there's much more available outside of our internal case studies, but I thought you might find this interesting and you won't see this other places. Just a few data points. Coaching participants are 2.3 times less likely to utilize extended illness benefits or EIB than non-participants. Among coaching participants who do utilize EIB, they utilize 2.85% less hours per person than non-participants. 9.8% difference in turnover between coaching participants and non-participants. Approximately 50% fewer inpatient visits per thousand versus a control group. 62% less ER visits, and large claims were down significantly. So what about the ROI for you as an EAP? If you're an EAP and you're watching this to get ideas moving forward, how does this help you build a healthier organization in terms of the bottom line and being able to stay in business and provide the services you want to provide? Well, one of the biggest things is it balances supply and demand. It allows you to have effective utilization of counseling resources where it's truly needed. It's also an outstanding differentiator between you and other EAPs. You know this. Employers have a lot of options when it comes to EAPs. How are you different? How are you adding services that others may not offer? Coaching is a big one with that. It allows you to expand your available services. It allows you to get into a lot of these other categories that you saw in that list of things that coaches can talk about. It gives you another marketing opportunity because you can go out to the employers you're working with. They care an incredible amount about prevention, about cutting things off at the pass before they become a problem. Now you can offer that. That can be a part of what you're doing. It builds on the confidentiality piece for the employers and what they can pull in with their employees. And then you've seen the articles. So many, whether it's SHRM or Business Journal or you name it, a lot of articles out there about EAPs being underutilized. So important right now, and yet the utilization numbers are frankly minuscule based on the need that we're seeing in the data. This allows you to expand that and get more appropriate utilization by the employees that you serve. So again, let's come back to that data we talked about right out of the gate. We said 47% see counseling as a sign of weakness, 30% don't believe their problems are big enough, and 32% believe they can handle it on their own. So how can we utilize this, the coaching piece, to help support those things, to help move the dial on those numbers so that people are getting the services, the assistance, the support that they're really needing? With those various data points, there's something called the therapeutic boost that can really have an impact here. Now, what the therapeutic boost does is it says there are a lot of things that counselors potentially need to work through when they're working with their clients. But can we help them take a lot of those things off their plate? We can, and that's where coaching comes in. So all those different categories we talked about before, the coaches can work through those, allowing the counselor to work on the deeper stuff, get below the surface. You've got a picture of our kids also just a few years ago. They're all grown up adults now, but this was one of my favorite pictures a few years back when they were in high school. And it was a reminder. Our daughter's a 5th grade teacher now, and she doesn't always get to teach because she's trying to help the kids work through all these other things. The coaches can help the employees work through those other things so the counselor can focus on the deeper stuff. In the teaching setting with our kids in high school, our goal as parents were to provide the basics, the things that maybe the coach would address, so that they were getting a good sleep, that they were eating reasonably well, that they felt loved when they walked in the door. So the teacher could teach and not have to address all those things. That's this concept of therapeutic boost, is that the counselor can focus on the critical things because the coach is providing that boost. We know the data, and I've popped a few just basic research studies up there for your reference if you want them, but we know the 4 keys: move, fuel, rest, and connect. They matter. And if the coach can help with those, what we call the 4 cornerstones or the catalyst cornerstones of move, fuel, rest, connect, it allows the employee to be a better employee, be a more effective employee, the leaders to be more effective in their leadership roles, and for the counselors to be able to focus on the things that they truly want to, need to focus on. So the examples you've got up there: exercise improves mental health by reducing anxiety, depression, negative mood, and by improving self-esteem and cognitive function. Healthy foods such as olive oil, fish, nuts, legumes, dairy products, fruits, vegetables have been inversely associated with the risk of depression. Those who averaged 6 hours or less of sleep were 2.5 times more likely to have frequent mental distress versus those who got more than 6 hours. And finally, social relationships, both quantity and quality, affect mental health. So that's one simple example from each of the 4 cornerstones of move, fuel, rest, and connect. The coach can help the employees work through those things, allowing the counselor to focus on what they do. And frankly, in the work setting, allow the leaders, the managers, to focus on the employee side, the work that needs to be done, instead of having to work through those other pieces. Now, the next thing I want to walk through is something called the building blocks of performance. I think this might garner some attention from both the EAP folks that are watching this and the employers, because this is an opportunity that I think gets missed in the health and wellness coaching realm because we leave out performance. My PhD focused on performance psychology and how can we utilize these components to elevate our outcomes, whether it's athletic, work, personal, relationships, you name it. What you see in front of you there is something called the building blocks of performance, and it's got health at the bottom, it's got wellness in the middle, and it's got performance at the top, because each one of those builds on the others. Now, if we go back in history of health and wellness stuff, that wheel of wellness that I showed you earlier as an example of all the different categories, it was used differently. It was presented as a wheel, literally like a bicycle wheel, and you were told you're supposed to be even. So you want to make sure that your emotional is as addressed as your physical, as your social, your spiritual, your occupational, your intellectual. And if those got out of whack, then it was like riding a flat tire as you went through your bike ride. Well, I'm not a big fan of that. A lot of reasons, I won't get into a lot of details now, but we have phases of life. There are times that you're more focused on your work or your school or your family or your health or some personal pursuit or hobby. So to think that those are all supposed to be exactly even all the time, frankly, I think is silly, but it doesn't take away from the fact that that's been the model since 1976. And it kind of makes me laugh because if you look at what's changed since 1976, I was born in 66, so the things that have changed, that the Apple computer didn't even come with a screen. You had to hook up it to your television set. The VCR, yeah, some of you are like, the what? Some of you know what I'm talking about there. The laser printer took up an entire room. It didn't sit next to your computer. It took up an entire room. That was 1976. Now, you wouldn't be satisfied if those things hadn't changed. I mean, I think how different our world would be if those things hadn't changed at all. It's changed dramatically. And yet we're still using this idea of keeping the equal dimensions of wellness. Now, we've tweaked it. We've gone to 7 dimensions, and we've gone to 10 dimensions. We've gone to 36 dimensions. No, just kidding. We have not gone to 36 dimensions, although I suppose we probably could. But what we did is we took that concept and we said, well, how can we make that more functional, more usable in a work type setting? And that's where we came up with this building blocks of performance. And where I think you'll get real excited about this, whether you're an EAP provider or an employer, is how this builds on itself. So you see you've got the health piece and the wellness piece, and they build on one another. But a lot of your employees, a lot of your leaders especially, a lot of your type A folks are going to have that, I'm fine, I'm good. I'm exercising, I'm eating pretty well. I don't need to talk to a coach. It's just, no, I'm good. And then they're like, oh, wait, coaching can help my performance? It can allow me to take the steps that would get me promoted, have a bigger impact, earn more money, move forward in my career, develop the company more? Yeah, absolutely, I want to participate in coaching. And then what happens is as I participate in coaching, we're addressing the health and the wellness that leads to that performance, and everybody benefits. So that's what that building blocks of performance is all about. And the powerful thing that we've seen happen over the years is that by the building blocks support the performance, and the performance engages those people who say, yeah, I'm probably fine. And it's fascinating. Just to give you an example, I don't need to sleep. I'm fine. I'll sleep when I'm dead. Well, okay, that sounds good on a poster maybe, but it's not allowing you to be the most effective leader long term, frankly, even short term. If you're not sleeping effectively, if you're bragging about not sleeping much, you're essentially saying to anyone listening that you don't really care about being at your best, that you would rather bring 70% of you to work than the full you to give everything you've got. And by engaging that person in the health and wellness coaching, the coach, an experienced coach, a trained coach, a nationally board certified coach who's familiar with this performance piece can then help that person see, wow, my performance is being limited by the things I'm not doing in the health and the wellness pieces. One quick example with that, aside from the sleep one with the leadership, that can apply to anybody. We had a participant from an employer years ago who the company had just put in place a no smoking policy. And so it had just been announced. We were coaching their employees. The employee got on the phone with the coach, and she was not happy. Let's just say it that way here for the video. She literally said to the coach, all right, fine. If they're going to charge me extra for being a smoker, I'm going to get my money's worth. I'm going to smoke more. So an inexperienced coach might take that and say, oh, no, Sally, whatever her name was, don't you know smoking's bad for you? It affects your health. It affects your blah, blah, blah. That doesn't help. When was the last time someone lecturing to you changed your approach to anything? It doesn't work, and yet we always fall back on that when we don't have the experience to know any better. But this coach knew better. So she said, okay, kind of chuckled with her and said, what would you like to talk about? And this employee said, well, my daughter's been wanting me to do one of these Tough Mudders with her. So could you help me get ready for that? Sure. So she and the coach worked through some basic stuff, some things that she could think through and work through and put together to prepare for this event that she was doing with her daughter. And when they had their next coaching session, get on the phone, and the coach says, how's it going? And she says, pretty good, but we were up doing kind of a practice run through that race, and I think my smoking is affecting my ability to really race well. Could you help me decrease how much I'm smoking? You see what happens there? When we have that opportunity to tap into the performance piece, oftentimes that brings us back to address the other things that might be more at the core. I want to get into some of the logistics, but before I do that, we reached out to some of our EAP partners prior to that presentation I did at the national conference just to get their feedback. What are they hearing? What are they seeing? What are they enjoying about partnering with a nationally board certified coaching provider to enhance their services? And this is some of the feedback that we got. They said it can be less stigmatizing than counseling, so it's a great first step. It's a good lead in to maybe where they'll eventually work with a counselor. It's a quick, positive way to reduce that feeling of being overwhelmed. They said, well, you know what? Not everyone needs a counselor. So the coach helps the client prioritize or sort through a lot of the everyday worries and stress and then be able to move forward. It's an easy conversation. They don't have to bring up the past. When they're talking to the coach, it's more present and future oriented, so they can leave this stuff off. And then if they need to at some point, they can connect with a counselor and go that direction. It's nice, she said, to have someone in your court who listens non-judgmentally. That's that coach's role, non-judgmental. And then it can be a great first step to help clients reduce their stress and feel better about whatever situation's going on. So with that kind of on the side, let's talk about the logistics. If you're at the point now, again, certainly feel free to reach out to us. We can talk you through it. It's real simple to integrate this stuff. Main logistics. There's 5 C's. Clarify your why. Confirm the credibility of your coaching partner. Clearly distinguish the difference between coaching and counseling. Make sure that is in there. Certify the partner's experience. There are a lot of options for coaching, folks. There are some that it's real short sessions. It's more of that verbal box checking. There are others that it's clearly effective, nationally board certified, relationship-oriented coaching. Make sure you certify that experience. And then coordinate the screening process. And your coaching partner can probably help you do that. I'm going to add a 6th C here, and that's the communication piece. You want to make sure that it's a very simple process to connect the coach and the counselor, or that process of moving the person over. We've seen over and over where the person, again, you heard the data earlier about people feel like my problem's not big enough for counseling, but okay, I'll talk to a coach. That's great because it gives them something, but sometimes the problem is they need more than coaching. And so not only does the coach need to understand that difference and when that transition needs to take place, but we need to have an easy handoff process to allow that to take place. As I mentioned, if we can be of any assistance, the contact information is down below in the description. Feel free to reach out. Whether we end up working with you or not, we're happy to talk through the details, some of the key things to look for, and I hope this is helpful. Thanks, everyone.